OSullivan. I'm doing educational games. So, why are educational games important? One is kind of, if you look at why we play, very much like learning is part of play. You can see it very much in the animal kingdom, like cubs. It's a classic example of like cubs fighting each other to learn how to fight and hunt. Why do people play it? Social interaction. There are other unclear reasons, like snowboarding crows in Canada. Seriously, they go on slides and slide down and do weird stuff. So not entirely sure why animals and humans play for certain games or whatever, but there is evidence to suggest like learning to do intrinsic life skills as well as social development, particularly in humans and maybe more intelligent animals like dolphins and whatever. The other reason why educational games are important is, I think personally, that our education system is a shambles. Its second level and primary level especially are very much a factory line setup.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, it's a passive learning system. The lecturer stands here like and relays information to you, and you basically accept it. In some ways, the Prussian model, the initial factory, it's often referred to as the factory model, is in some ways better than it is now. They had a system where older students would help younger students, or not older students but better students. It wasn't, classes weren't defined by age groups and trying to shove through an average. You were defined by your ability, and better students who were better were given tutors, and they tutored younger students as well. And despite this, it's still used as a derogatory comparison to like today's setup. Yes, passive learning. And then our social issues outside of education are seeping in and affecting education, so especially in America, where stuff like zero tolerance policies are getting in the way of children's education, especially boys. And there was a thing called the 100 Girls Survey. Ali, I can't remember her surname, I have a reference there to it later, had a TED talk on it and talked about this 100 Girls Survey. For every 100 girls, there were so many more boys. In extreme examples, double or triple the amount of boys who were affected in the same way. So, say some boys didn't like the classroom, or if 100 girls were suspended, 200 boys were suspended. For every 100 girls who were expelled, 300 boys were expelled. And the idea is that the elementary model isn't engaging boys. It's a bit stereotypical, but there are stereotypes for a reason, that boys are more aggressive, and zero tolerance policies are affecting this. And where educational games might help is setting up an active learning environment, and might engage them in ways that they more strongly associate with. So there are three types of educational software. There's the educational computer games, the learning software, media, and then there's the traditional computer games. So those are the three I want to talk about. We have the educational computer games. These are the classic examples. They're tacky, they're lightweight, underfunded, they're generally aimed at children, and were scoffed at by older potential target audience. They are generally very literal in their explanations, only using minimal game design elements to try and engage the user. So here you have click and drag and shape recognition and memory games. They're quite terrible. And they're known for it now. Why that is, again, underfunding, poor gameplay. Those would be the two main reasons. Then there's learning software and media like Khan Academy, Udacity, maybe speaking of typing, if you remember that, like the 90s. In fairness to them, they're very robust. They have a wide breadth of explanations in their topic areas. They are typically quite approachable, using incremental progress, step-by-step tutorials, and having the benefit of being able to play them whenever you want, as many times as you want. You don't have to rely on a teacher, but it's still somewhat passive. It doesn't really engage them. It's engaged the end user. It's not trying to make you learn. It's just there for you to take up on. Sometimes you'll get gamification, but it's tends to be very shallow. Even Khan Academy, like it doesn't really pay heed to it. There's a quote, if you can dig it out, it's a nightmare to dig it out, but it kind of dismisses gamification. You're here to learn. You're an adult. You're here to learn. This shouldn't get in your way. It's not core to the software or media. So, and then we have normal video games, which are typically for entertainment. But some of the best games I've played use learning and exploration of their rule set to great benefit. So we have The Legend of Zelda, Super Meat Boy, Super Mario, and Dark Souls. They have explicit and implicit learning. So Super Meat Boy, for example, will tell you how to jump and it will tell you how to run. And it will quickly give you an example level of where these are useful. Then it'll throw a new level at you, where a big gap, and walking up to the gap and jumping isn't going to work. You need to do a running start. And it will have it in such a way that the first two levels you had, maybe a small little gap, and then the third level where you have to do the running jump, you have a bigger room, and it should be implicit and obvious to you that this is the next step. And the same said with Dark Souls, it tells you how to swing a sword and how to dodge, but how do you get through this enemy's defense? You have to explore their attack pattern and find an exploit. Zelda, there's puzzle solving, there's dungeon exploring. Skyward Sword recently introduced puzzle elements to their enemies, so they'll have patterns in their attacks. Say one four-handed guy, he will block along the y-axis and leave the x-axis open, so you just swing horizontally, you get through it. Then that's one way education is in games, in traditional video games. The other one is kind of social commentaries, like Spec Ops: The Line, where it explores like why gamers make the decisions, and like most of us are kind of blind and don't really pay heed to maybe the morality of what we're doing. And this Kerbal Space Program is probably one of the best examples I have of an educational game, whether or not it was intentionally educational or not. So the next one. First of all, it's a great game at its core. It's engaging, it's a robust flight simulator, it's fun to put these contraptions together, even if they do crash and burn almost immediately. My own Jebediah Kerman died in a horrible accident. It inspires active learning. So when I went into it, I went a bit crazy looking into the math tutorials of space and space flight, trying to perfect my orbit around Earth. I never could. Others, fans become obsessive, often going to great depths to learn and get better. You can find threads dedicated to it. There's a whole community being built around this, and it inspires people. It's like people's sheer enthusiasm is almost like magnetic for other people and drags them with it. And that's what you want. You want a game whose core is just good enough to drag people into it, and you learn through your community and through the game. And this is all before the announcement of Kerbal EDU, which aims for a better learning experience with an updated UI, better explanation of core concepts. So, what it could do better is, it is fundamentally an entertainment game, and it needs to work on its difficulty curve, because there are some aspects that are just, I mean, it's space exploration. I mean, the whole sandbox of Kerbal Space Program is a scaled version of our universe. It's a bit insane. And explaining concepts is something that doesn't do tremendously well. It does it through text. And where it works best is when it's actively engaging you to explore and experiment with space parts and space objects, and objects, but it could be more intuitive. It could explain some of the maths better using visualization as opposed to some blobs of text. But from this, we can learn that visualization, learning, inspiration, and feedback are pretty much critical to learning. Your reward should be, for often like passive learning in classroom, you're learning maths, you're learning reams of text, and you're learning it off. You're not applying it, you're not using it creatively. There's no reward. There's just, oh, I got an A, or B, or C, or whatever. These are abstract concepts and topics, and their benefits are abstracted from you in an effort to try and get as many people proficient as possible. This with educational games like KFC, actively engage their users and give you feedback and reward and say, all right, you can see the potential for what you're learning here. And that's it, I think. Yeah. And then next questions.
What did you mean by that zero tolerance policy you talked about?
It's a thing in America at the moment. It's been there for a while. It's to do with violence. Well, we know like there's massacres happen a bit too often over there. And more tougher policies are coming out. So one example that Ali gave, if you go up one, I can get her full name. It was Ali Shellman gave me to re-engage boys in learning at TED Talk. She discussed how it was either a boy donated toys to an elementary school, and some of these things had swords and little guns in them, and the teacher took them all out before giving them to the kids. Because there's a zero tolerance policy. Violence is just not accepted in any form, visual, an actual engagement, whatever.
And you have to learn about the American Revolution?
Yeah, to learn all about that later on.
So much for that zero tolerance.
But there's more to it, particularly in that re-engaging boys and learning. There's that was kind of like going the opposite way. Typically, there's like women and learning and games and whatever. This one, boys are being raised in elementary schools that are taught by women. There's like over half the teachers in the States, at least, are women, which is not a bad thing intrinsically, but if it's not good for role models for boys who are typically the opposite mindset of girls and women.
I do think there is actually a quote from The Simpsons, funnily enough, but I think it's a good quote that summarizes it. Was actually a teacher within The Simpsons talking about boys in education. It's like, boys need to build stuff, they need to break stuff and build it again.
Yeah, that's ultimately why it came down to like the two different mindsets between boys and girls, and that boys aren't really being catered to.
That actually might be why Kerbal Space Program is so good, because you are literally building stuff, breaking and building it again.
And your first type there, educational computer game, are you going to explore serious games initiative?
I was going to from a point of view of like how you learn in them, and then try and draw those concepts over. I'm going to do the same thing in gamification. I don't particularly like it. It's quite shallow. It's quite shallow. It's applied in a very shallow fashion a lot of the time, like in Khan Academy, and it's done that in games sometimes. But it does have two concepts I really like. It has incremental progress and reward for your success. Now, typically, you'll get really shallow versions, like again, Khan Academy. It's badges and points. It doesn't really matter. Stat tracking.
Let's say you think of the demographic now. Hold on.
Okay, maybe for kids. All right.
Demographic, yeah.
I kind of come in at a more broader audience point of view. Kids would probably engage with that a bit more. Where was I going?
On the serious games, like, you know, kind of a social commentary as well.
Yeah.
As well. Then Darfur is dying, World Without Oil, like, you know. I wouldn't ignore the Serious Games initiative, you know, it's part of it as well.
Yeah, on top of like, no matter how good you make your educational games or how much sugar you put on top of it, at the core is still a subject topic that maybe students won't get engaged with. And do you think there's something deeper that needs to be done there, where we can't just like force all these topics with now gamifying them for learning, and that students should be open up to more choice or something, or should we still give them this core set of skills and be forcing education on them, even though it's through a game and we just let it
I'm not sure I completely understand.
Yeah, so like students are still like, if a student hates maths, he won't want to learn maths no matter.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, the point I think of educating them is to better their relay of this information and engage people. If you don't want to learn maths, you're not going to learn maths. I can't make.
But is there a way of repurposing it? Tricking? Oh, no, not tricking. That's actually.
Kind of the classic example of Parsons and playing the educational game. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that.
I was more coming from the point of view of just improving the fairly terrible implementations that are out there, but it is food for thought. I personally, it's a bit of an absolute. I hate thinking like that, but I personally have the opinion that if you don't want to learn maths, you're not going to learn maths. You can hammer it as much as you want. I mean, I know I hated maths up until university, and I strived with C's and B's just because I had to do it. It wasn't like out of love for it or anything. But go on.
Do you think because, like at the moment, the examples of educational games are all made by people who are more concerned with getting users to continually use it than actual getting users to learn? Because like Khan Academy, Duolingo, they're still all products. Whereas if the educational game was made by, say, like, someone who's come from some educational institution, like, would they have better focus, kind of?
Yeah, probably.
There are some examples. There are some examples. Universities.
There was MIT Games for Teaching or Teach for Game. I can't remember what it was called. Is it there?
There are a few examples.
There are a few examples
from
of
educational
games built from educators. The MIT one was to do with political relationships, I think. I think you were playing it as a what? Pardon?
There was one on climate change that came from Stanford.
I think
There
I've
are
heard that
examples.
before. That wasn't the MIT one. The MIT one was, I think, was politics. It was teaching about like how policies and whatever affect global space. There are examples of that, and I think they do come out better in studies. But the problem with studies, I think everyone comes in with a certain mindset that they have to do certain things. I don't think these have ever got a broader audience. Personally, I think if you take a topic like space that incorporates lots of different fields like mathematics, physics, and make a robust, fun game using that, and then try to explain the concepts behind it with visualization and engagement and community, then you're better. Then it's going to be a better educational tool than any educational software or media.
Okay.
I'm just going to ask, are you going to look into like what virtual educational games can teach? Sort of stuff?
Oh yeah, I was thinking about limitations like say how do you teach history? The only examples I can think of are Crusader Kings, Total War games, where it's almost like it's always just a side note, like they just have the descriptions of the battalions that were famous in those battles.
Age of Empires?
Age of Empires, yeah. Two. I remember two.
Three wasn't good. It had its moments with history, like I didn't know about the 7 Years' War.
Age of Empires 2, I'm only doing it because I played it recently. The campaigns are fairly in-depth and they do give you a fair idea of like the overall story. I don't know how accurate they are.
The Aztecs weren't accurate.
Pardon?
The Aztecs weren't accurate. I think the rest were pretty accurate.
Like they are told from the point of view of storytellers, so I don't know how flamboyant or extravagant they are with their retelling of the stories, but they are good examples and engaging you. But Age of Empires doesn't. It is more of a game. It is further away from that extreme than KSP.
Okay, we'll leave some room. Cian, if you